any true leader has that ability to see people not where they are today, not their current circumstance, but to see who they can be. I've had people that have seen me at low moments and maybe realize the potential that's out there and would challenge me in certain ways. Well, welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast, and this is going to be probably the most unique episode we've had to date. This is our 4-year anniversary of hosting the podcast, and a lot of people have had questions over the years, like, Brad, why haven't you done one with just you, speaking about the company, the podcast, the brand? A list of questions I've gotten over the years I wanted to speak about, and, biggest wins, entrepreneurship journey, playing the long game, mentors, essentially what has made our brand who we are today, the purpose of the podcast, where it started. And so being that it's 4 years, we've tried to do something kind of fun each year of the anniversary. And now that we're 4 years in, here we are. So this one's just going to be me today. So going to kind of go through a little bit about my personal journey, things that have impacted me in my life. I look at legacy. Part of the reason I want to do this now is, I've been blessed my entire life in a lot of ways. Came from a pretty humble background. My dad was a blue collar electrician, worked in the trades his entire life. My mom's a stay-at-home mom, grew up in San Diego, oldest of 6 kids, and, pretty simple upbringing, but amazing, great parents, which I'll get into at some point, just the impact my mom and dad have had on me. And again, fortunately throughout my life, been super healthy, always competed in sports throughout high school, junior high. I actually ran cross country and track in high school. Was fortunate to be a team captain for the cross country and track teams. My events, I did mile and 2 mile and high jump and track, and of course distance and cross country. Little late bloomer for me as far as basketball and football and stuff that I started playing a lot more, in college, and golf now. Of course, for those that know me know I love golf, just every part about it. But, throughout my journey, been really fortunate with health, and had a little bit of a medical scare. Some that are pretty close, some know the story. And I figured it was just important to share just the context because, again, this is not like a goodbye, if you will. The podcast is going to go strong. We have a lot of plans for some rebranding and some stuff we're doing with the podcast, and it's going to continue. But the reality is I definitely wanted to take an episode to kind of, as I mentioned early on, this is, who I am and what's made me, essentially the people around me, the wonderful people that have influenced me throughout my life. And Father's Day weekend, I had a stroke, and so it was a Friday morning, Father's Day weekend. And, it's one of those things that really make you evaluate life, right? Priorities. And, I feel that I've done a pretty good job with, as best as I can, priorities, having 6 kids myself and running a company and, marriage and life and, all the different things that pull at us. But Friday morning, pretty normal day for me. I think one thing that's unique, my mom's very similar. She sleeps probably 5 hours a night. And I've been the same. I sleep 5 to 6 hours a night. It's pretty common. So it was a pretty normal day for me. Went to bed about 11:30, midnight. Alarm went off at 4:30. About 4:45, which is a pretty typical day for me. I was sending some emails and catching up just on a few things. Got up for the day. And fortunately, I wasn't driving, because we may not be having this conversation now, because, having a stroke while on the freeway, I was supposed to be driving up north, which would have been not very good. But again, timing, stood up, and as I was walking to the bathroom, to start the day, I remember looking down at my legs, because instantly I felt as if I couldn't feel my legs. And I'm like, well, did I stand up too fast? But as quick as my brain could sense that, hey, you can't feel your legs, your legs are numb, I fell down, collapsed in the bathroom, full stroke mode at that point. Luckily, my wife heard me fall. She woke up, came over, saw that I was not responsive again. Having been through a stroke, it's kind of an odd thing. You're fully present, so no pain. I was present the entire time. I just had no feeling. I had no control over my nervous system. So she's speaking to me. I could hear her. She's calling 911. I could hear the entire conversation. Again, pretty terrifying. I know for my wife, probably a little PTSD from that episode. But I just remember mentally just trying to stay present, right? She was saying, Brad, stay with me, thinking, you can't have my husband pass on me, which of course was not the case. But she was giving me water. I was able to drink it. My face was a little droopy. But a few minutes after the episode, which it was scary, I wasn't sure what was happening to, my body as my nervous system shut down. And had no feeling in my lower body, my lower extremities, especially my left leg, because it happened on the right side of my brain. And was rushed to, ambulance came luckily, and I think about 5-7 minutes after the stroke, they were in our bathroom. They kind of pulled me out of where I was and leaned me against the bathtub, and saw that I really didn't have a lot of balance. And they checked my blood sugar right away, which they do, and realized that, there's no diabetic, blood sugar's fine. He's having a stroke. And so they got me on the gurney and, got me in the ambulance and off to the hospital. On my way there, by this point, I could speak, was fully present, had no problem talking. I was kind of joking with the firemen that were there, that, hey, you're probably more of an EMT than you are a fireman, because, less fires are fighting as opposed to more traffic accidents and, strokes like I was having. Get to the hospital, and it's a stroke center, thankfully, so they're prepared for it. And, as I'm there in the hospital, and of course my wife, and she had called my brother Greg came over, and my mom, and of course, our kids were taking care of my 3 older girls. Came over to the hospital. My 3 younger kids went to their grandparents' house. Fortunately, they got me in for an MRI pretty quickly to confirm it's a stroke. They did a full hour scan. By this time, it was probably about 8:30 a.m. And I remember sitting there at this point, I'd gotten feeling back, right side of my leg, and pretty much waist up. I was fine, could move my arms, but my left leg, from my hip down to my toes, was gone. I thought I was probably permanently paralyzed. And I remember speaking to a neurologist, and he's like, Brad, you may never walk again, may have to start over again and retrain. And I remember just feeling a peace that, whatever happened, I wasn't really fearful. I was like, well, if I can't walk, then that's just going to be, something I'll deal with. I'll figure it out. I'm alive. I'm here. And I will say, part of that mentality, again, I think part of me is innately positive. I'll share why, just some life experiences that I've had throughout my life that I feel have had a big impact on me as an entrepreneur, and just that positive impact. Also, Dave Clark, who some of you know I had on, I believe, from our 2-year anniversary, we had Dave on, who was my business mentor. And, Dave had battled cancer, and I'll speak about some life lessons from Dave here in the episode. But what's interesting with Dave is that he dealt with a cancer that was terminal for most people, and yet he's someone you never saw suffer. He just always smiled. You never knew that he was dealing with anything. He just had this positive vibe, this positive empowerment, and this ambiance around him, that he just really lived life to the fullest, and he really cared about people. He cared about his legacy. He's someone that probably could have rode off in the sunset, but yeah, he saw me, invested in me. And I'll share that experience here later. But, so having that example is really important for me to think, positive, that, hey, no matter what happens, it's a lot of life and a lot of our health, a lot of our recovery is based on outlook more than his circumstance. And I remember just thinking that I wasn't really nervous. I knew it'd be okay. I knew I'd figure it out. I'd find a way. I consider myself a fighter. When the neurologist said he may not walk again, I just remember thinking in my mind, I'm going to do this as fast as I can. I'm the fastest person to get through this. It's just kind of my makeup, figure out a way to do that. And shortly thereafter, they were doing some testing, and I could feel my toes. I was able to wiggle my toes, so that was a good sign. And about 30 minutes later, I was able to lift my leg. And so the stroke happened at 5 a.m. Again, by 9 a.m., I was able to move. About 10 a.m., I was able to stand up, and walk through the hallways. And by noon, I was fully functional. So really blessed. I know that's not always the case. And fortunately for me, went through all the testing, was out of the hospital on Saturday. went back. I was released Saturday, went back home Sunday, and was back at work on Monday. Again, cleared by the doctor. I wasn't trying to overdo it. But I think part of this is I have something that's called the PFO, which is essentially an opening. So everyone, when they're born, has an opening in their heart. When you're in the mother's womb, that's how you get oxygen. And so that when you're born, it closes. Well, 80% of people it closes, 20% doesn't. I didn't know that. I've never been healthy my whole life. As I mentioned, I've never really, been a cardiologist. I mean, until now, this is the only time I've dealt with a cardiologist or, done an echo or a TE scan on my heart and to realize I have a PFO. So for anyone listening, I recommend go speak to a cardiologist. I've since then met a lot of people who had PFO, had the PFO closure, which is what I'll be getting end of September, early October-ish. Still finalizing that date, but it's a pretty easy surgery. It's really not, it's pretty, it's not very invasive at all. But anyways, I'd recommend get that checked because people with a PFO have a high risk of stroke, which I did not know because it's not a hereditary thing in my family. So get that checked out. I think that's the big thing for us is health, right? How we manage health and stress and balance life and all those things. And cardiologist, is important. Since then, I've done a bunch of testing. Cholesterol levels were good. Even at the time, I think I was a 135, just being open. Heart rate was good. Again, I'm still super active and was cleared. The doctors cleared me for travel, for airplane, for sports. And in fact, all of them wanted me to continue to do that. So I'll stay active. That's part of the reason you recovered is you're really healthy. And so, diet's something I watch a little bit more and, take a baby aspirin every day. But other than that, I'm not like on a blood thinner, just a baby aspirin. So a little TMI for those listening, but I think it's relevant just as we get into this. So fortunately healthy now. Most of you that see me may not notice anything's happening, but have a great support team, an amazing team at AFT, incredible people that work for us that believe in the brand and the company and have done so much. And for that reason, we didn't miss a beat. That's a big part of who we are and what we've been able to establish with such great people that work here. Again, my wife, who was super responsive and so grateful for her and everything she does for our family and home and, all the work she puts in with her own business too, just to allow the growth we've had at AFT and, a lot of the commitments I have from, the podcast and networking and, our Builder 20 and other things that consume time. And, it wouldn't be able to do it without, my better half. I had an experience. There's a mentor of mine early on. And I think this is a big part of when I'm looking at hiring people and the people that we have. Couple of lessons is his name was Doug Steinley. And Doug, very successful business owner from Los Angeles and Southern California. And in fact, built many companies, one of which was California Pools and Spas, that some people know. The Arizona division has different management that he sold that off. But essentially, I remember him early on that he mentioned that as a business owner, as a mentor, as just a father, as a human, right, on this earth, that everything's better because you were involved. And you think about that imagine if all of us as people that live here on this earth, if we had the mentality that everyone that we associate is better because they've associated with us. Every place that we've been is better because we were there. And I think the easy application is he had said that, which stood out to me. I remember that having an impact him, from a leadership perspective. And in between the conference, when he was speaking about that, I remember going into the restroom, like all of us, bathroom break in between, the little break there between the conference. And it's a public bathroom. Everyone's washing their hands afterwards, soap, grabbing paper towels. And of course, anytime you're washing your hands, and especially in a big group setting, a lot of water spilling all over the sink and, can turn into hard spots and stains and whatnot. And what's interesting, I watched him, and as he washed his hands, he grabbed some paper towels and he started wiping the sink. And there was some overspray, some water on the mirror. He cleaned that off. And so there he is cleaning up that around. And there's a couple of paper towels that missed a trash bin that were on the floor. And he picked those up, and that had impacted even something that small, right? To be cognizant, to say, I'm going to wipe down the counter and to pick up some trash on the floor. I think that's just a mentality that all of us, and I've tried to associate that. I've never been perfect by any means, but I do hope that in anywhere I go, or anyone I've networked with or communicated with, or ideally in some way they're better, right? It's a big mantle, but I think there's some priority there. And something else that he was really big on is that he had a unique talent to see people not as they are, but who they could become. And I think any true leader has that ability to see people not where they are today, not their current circumstance, but to see who they can be. And fortunately, I've had people that have seen me at low moments and maybe realize the potential that's out there and would challenge me in certain ways. I do that to my team. I think sometimes it's easy to give up on certain personnel and team members without realizing, is it them? Are they just a factor of the environment we're putting them in? Are they a factor of the environment based on our lack of organization as leaders, as company owners? Do they have the right tools? Do they have the right training? Do they have the right processes and systems? These are things that I think a lot of us fail as business owners. And the reality is, as we can see who our children or our employees or trade partners and suppliers, so many, what's the potential? Are we helping them get to that level, right? Are they better because we're interacting with them? Are they, there's something that there's a lot of truth to building people up. I remember as a kid, my mom, she would play board games and these like memory games with me as a kid. And she'd always say, "Oh, like you're smart." So I remember being as a kid, you're hearing these positive things, and you end up becoming that because someone's believing in you and, leading you to the next level. So just a little food for thought there. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of ups and downs, especially building a company. And a lot of people have asked, well, as an entrepreneur, it changes by the mood. It's 4 p.m. could be super happy, by 4:30 super down. Could be having the greatest day, and then you get a phone call and everything kind of goes upside down. You think things are working out, and then the problems come up that most of us are dealing with. And so some of the value adds, the positivity I mentioned, information in, information out. A lot of people will ask me how you balance certain things, and I'll get into the consistency, but a big thing for me is information in and out, that I don't let things linger. When there's issues, there's problems, you address them head on right away. If I'm busy or tied up and, get a message, I try to be really responsive and let them know I'll follow up. I'll get back to you. And I do, I have a method of how I track things. And so I think that's, the responsiveness, those are really good habits. Good business owners, good people, they're responsive, they're organized, they're positive, they understand how to process information, they understand how to delegate information. There's nothing more frustrating to me as a business owner than working with people that don't respond. That's it. Just respond. If you're busy, just like, let me know that my message isn't just going into thin air and disappearing. At least there's someone on the other side that's saying, hey, I may not have an answer, but I'm working on it. I'll get back with you. And what's really important for me is that even if I don't have the answer, I'll follow up with, the client or the trade or the employee and say, hey, just, I'm still working on this. It's top of my mind. I'll get you an answer. So that follow through is really important. To be successful as a business owner, a lot of people say, well, what, with social media, with marketing, with your business, with, is there a secret to success, right? The easiest thing that I can tell people is consistency. You think about just that regular consistency, and it could be something as simple as exercise. If you want to be fit, well, it's not going to happen in 4 weeks, maybe not happen in 12, but it's years, right? You see people, it's years of exercising, feeling like you don't want to go to the gym, and then you still go, even when you don't want to go. And maybe you're not motivated, or you're tired, or you're exhausted, but you go in and maybe you lift some light weights. And I know Arnold Schwarzenegger's been big on this. He's like, the biggest thing is be there, right? Be where you need to be. And when he was training, he said there's days he didn't want to train, but he would go into the gym and he would lift, lighter weights to get in the mood and get going. And then eventually his adrenaline would kick in and he'd start, lifting heavier. But with social media, I think that's really important. It's easy to get burnout. It's easy to get burnout on marketing, For me, I look at, we've been YouTube. We haven't had any overnight success. The podcasts I've done every week, I think, 4 years now, we haven't missed a week. And despite personal things that have come up, my father passing away, my business partner passing away, the stroke I had, the day-to-day life, things will come up, and it's that preparation, right? It's the consistency. It's having, the preparation to have guests booked and have them on and do this every week for years has been a big commitment. For 4 years, it's 208th episode that we're releasing. And to me, there's value there because, in life, I hope that I've always been consistent, right, on how I treat people and try to better myself and other people. And that's a big part of it. Social media, there's no success. It'd be nice if we could figure out the algorithm and, the shortcut to instant growth. And it's just not out there. That's just life in general. It's a slow game, but it's consistent. It's, I know that, posts I do today may not have an impact for years down the road. There may be someone that sees it that'll hire us years down the road. So it's that long game, playing the long game, but it's the consistency every day. Have your routine and go through that and make sure you hit that and don't miss a beat. One of the other mentors I had, so when I first graduated college, one of the benefits I had was working, doing semi-custom, semi-production homes. And in fact, Adam Cade, who works for me, he was our boss out of college, which is kind of fun. But when I was there on the subdivision, we had sales reps that would sell the homes, and then we as superintendents would build them. And Martin Ono, who was one of the salesmen, he was one of the salesmen there at the subdivision we're at, one of the most generous people I knew. A lot of people, for whatever reason, look down on contractors, and it's not everyone, but some do, especially some salespeople, and there's some people in the organization that figured they could hire any superintendent. They didn't realize, the difficulty of the jobs that we do. But he was always so gracious. I remember that, we'd have meetings with the sales team and go through the projects. And every Wednesday he would bring the best breakfast. Like, he would just take care of us. He would, take us out to eat at the Hangar Cafe, which is at Chandler Airport, which is always fun. But I remember he would always say, I remember on our birthdays, and again, I was, just out of college, poor kid. I remember on my birthday, he walks up, he's like, "It's your birthday." And he shakes my hand and hands me $100 bill. And at the time he said, "Brad, never forget that generosity precedes prosperity." And again, the backstory there is when I first met Martin, I was at a sales meeting. He walks up to me and he's like, "Brad, how's it feel to be the son of a twin?" And I'm like, "Who are you? How do you know who I am? I grew up in San Diego. Here I'm in Phoenix. How did you know that my dad's a twin brother?" And funnily enough, he grew up, blue collar, just like I did back in Lemon Grove, La Mesa area of San Diego. And so he actually grew up, he was a little younger than my parents, but he knew my dad because his older brothers hung out with my dad growing up, which is kind of a small world that we both ended up in Phoenix. But it's always had an impact on me because, if anything, I'd always hope that I'm more generous, and in all things, right? In time and effort, how we take care of our employees. I think that's been one of the little secrets there for our retention. Is I've always tried to find a way where we can compensate our team higher than industry norm. I care about them and care about their livelihoods, and it's really important to me. And I think that's always true, that there's something about trying to do the right thing, and that generosity precedes prosperity. And I greatly believe that, whether we're serving in our communities and giving time, donating to local charities, and finding different ways to help those in need, because there's a lot of people that stand in need right now. Opportunity cost, something I really didn't understand. So when I was in high school, again, as I mentioned, I grew up, my dad was blue collar, so we didn't live in an area where my dad and family was in a position where they could call when our roof had to be redone. We weren't calling a roofing company. My dad's out there after work, up on the roof, putting on new asphalt shingles on the roof, pouring concrete in the backyard for us kids to play basketball in the backyard. All these little, that's what he'd do. He'd wake up Saturday, he'd come home after hours, and he'd work. He'd be working all day, and then he'd come home and he'd work some more. And I remember there was one of my coworkers when I was working as an electrician, Joe, and I remember thinking at the time, because that's how I grew up, that yeah, anytime that you can perform the work yourself, you're going to be saving money. So just do it yourself. You're running the company. Well, yeah, if I don't have to hire any help, and I won't call up some of my professional associates, but I know some other GCs and I know some other design firms and architecture firms that won't hire help. And yes, on their bottom line, you know, for them, it may look great, but their performance or lack thereof affects many of us. And where I'm getting at the opportunity cost is that, yes, there's a stage in life where a lot of us may not be in a financial position to go hire a roofer, and we have to be out there putting on the new roof ourselves. But there's an opportunity cost. There comes a time in life where you realize that, hey, if I'm focused on my business and I'm focused on this aspect of my business, it's better served time and investment wise for me to focus here and hire someone to do this, this element of the company, this scope of work, and self-perform. And so by subbing that out, one, now you're servicing that aspect. And number two, I can focus on things that could become more profitable or more efficient or better systems over time. And I remember learning that lesson. It didn't really make sense until now. I feel now in my 40s, just being transparent, I'm 42. I feel I understand that a lot more. And especially as I look at who we hire with AFT, and not just the experience, but the cultural, importance coming into the company and the job roles that they perform, the value in that investment, the opportunity cost to invest in them, to not only give them opportunity for them and their family and their career, but also how that opportunity cost now opens up where there's other avenues that can be open. And it's a fine line, but there is value to that opportunity cost. I mentioned Dave Clark and the positivity he had, just a quick background for AFT. I think this is really relevant to the conversation. But after the recession, so many of you that have been listening know that I worked at the Omni Mauna Lucia, and the Mauna Lucia was this amazing $350 million hotel and spa. And we finished it roughly 2009. Most of us know the housing crash was 2008, 2009. And it was a really tough market here in Phoenix. In fact, it was so tough and so slim that I actually was looking at leaving construction. So I was taking the GMAT. I was going, I was taking some prep courses for the GMAT, took the GMAT, I was applying to grad school, was fortunate to get accepted to grad school. And, but before grad school happened, I'm going to rewind just a little bit. So 2010, Dave Clark came in and he purchased this project called the Chateau on Central. Now, these were brownstones. There were 21 brownstones, and they were partially finished. So the investor had started this project near downtown Phoenix. Recession hit, lost the property, and it sat vacant for a few years. I believe this one actually sat vacant since 2007-ish. So 2010, Dave purchased it from the bank. There was fencing around. There was some inventory on site. There was a couple of visitors that were living there on site that had snuck in and made home there. But essentially, the property had been completed. So Dave had come down and he was interviewing general contractors. And as he's interviewing these general contractors, we were one of the three that he was interviewing. And it was a gentleman in our company. So Spencer, who works for me now at AFT, Spencer, myself, and Cameron went to grad school and actually he works for Adobe in the real estate division, Adobe PDF. But Cameron, Spencer, and I spent a lot of hours, and we knew the writing was on the wall. In fact, we were informed by our employer that if we did not win this project, we were going to be terminated of our role for the company that we're at. So essentially, I remember this was probably April, and being really scared that, hey, if we don't get this job, my career's over. Essentially, I don't have a job to go to. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. At this time I had 3 daughters that were pretty young, and being young father. So it was pretty nerve-wracking. And fortunately, we spent a lot of time. I remember the week of the bid, we were in the conference room putting together numbers, negotiating with subcontractors and suppliers, just trying to be as competitive as possible because it was such a competitive bid and everyone needed this project. There weren't a lot at the time. And so it was really sharpened pencil. And we'd be in the conference room till 2, 3 a.m., drive home, be back at 6 a.m., just a couple hours of sleep. And fortunately, we won the project. And through that project that next year, became really good friends with Dave and Rudy Rote, who was his director, his business operations, and they were out of Wisconsin. And we built a really unique friendship with Dave and Rudy at the time, and his wife Kirsten. And I remember asking Dave why he selected us, and he said, we had some really good GCs bidding it, but we just really liked how competitive you guys were. Every time we'd show up at Chateau, you three were there. You were taking inventory, walking every unit, seeing exactly what phase. So we just knew you put in the work, and so that friendship was built. And after that is when I'm like, well, I don't know how long this project's going to go. So that's when I took the GMAT and was looking at changing careers. And I did a YouTube video on this a long time ago, but 2011 was a really hard year for me personally. 2011, we were at the Chateau. I was accepted to grad school, and a close friend of mine knew that I was going to be going to school out of state, and so he said, "Brad, let's go on a fishing trip to Alaska, and kind of a last rendezvous since you may not end up back in Arizona after you get your MBA." And while I was there, my father called me and let me know that this I found out. He said, my ex-wife at the time had sat down with them and let them know that she didn't want to be married to me anymore. And so, had been through a couple tough experiences to this point in life. 2011, realized, hey, grad school is about 2 weeks away, and going through divorce and with 3 young daughters. I think my daughters were 7, 5, and 2 at the time. And so I never made it to grad school, never got my MBA. And I was actually in a hotel room. So I was kind of lost in 2011 being, I trained my replacement at the company I was working at. So when we were awarded the Chateau with Dave, they hired a new employee because I was leaving the state. I was going to grad school, and the company did not have enough work to bring me back since they had hired someone. So I was out of a job. Grad school was not an option, and was unemployed. And there really wasn't anyone hiring for construction. And so my plan with grad school was to go off and get into healthcare in the medical field. I had a friend, Dan Lemon, that was going to help me get an opportunity in General Electric in their healthcare division, which is where he had worked. And fortunately, although mostly they had hired MBAs, they were giving me a chance to see if I could essentially work my way up, and so they flew me out. GE flew me out to their headquarters in Milwaukee. And I remember I was in my hotel room in Milwaukee the night before the interview. I'd just flown in, getting ready for my interviews the next day. And Dave Clark had found out somehow that I was going through divorce, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Brad, don't take the job. It'd be a mistake." Those are his exact words. He said, and this goes back to earlier in the conversation where he mentioned, "Hey, I'm in Wisconsin. I have the Chateau. You're familiar with it. I have some other projects down there. I'd like you to run those. You could be here. I understand you're going through divorce. You can stay in Phoenix. Your daughters can be there, stay in the same school." And it was really, I can't express the level of gratitude at the time and what that meant to me at the lowest point, probably that I can remember in my life in 2011. Just feeling like I'd lost everything from work and family to now having, a door opened, for me to kick down. And sure enough, fast forward, the time passed and started AFT, got my license and, partnered with Dave, and he helped get our firm started. And here we are today, 11 years later, and very blessed. And, shortly thereafter, the mutual friend who was actually in Alaska with me knew an amazing girl and set us up. And so those of you that met Ashley, we were set up and we're married and have had 3 kids. And so I had 3 and 3, she has 3 step kids and our 3, and, I have 6. And we've been really fortunate, but a few things I learned from Dave by just shadowing him, especially those first few years. Dave had to make some tough decisions like anyone. 2011, 12, 13, 14 were tough years. Phoenix really didn't see any bed. The market really didn't turn until 2015, 16, 17 here in Arizona, for most of us at least. And something I learned is that, in my past, I don't want to say I was a hothead, but, I think a lot of us can show the emotions on our sleeve. Dave was really big on, keep the ace in the hole, don't show all your cards, but more importantly, it wasn't just from a negotiation or negotiate, not to just negotiate, not that standpoint. It was more relationship side. And I saw where he had to terminate an employee. And I remember thinking in every right, this employee was not performing, had done some unethical things. And I think most of us would have been pretty stern. And to see Dave, that he would, the way he had hard conversations, he would never open up with these hard conversations. He would always build them up and show a lot of love and compassion. I thought that was really unique to see a business owner with that tact, right, with that candor as he communicated with people. And he was really big on he never burned bridges, ever. Even if it's someone who's essentially burned you, he always saw the good in people. Very similar to Doug Steinley, where I mentioned that not see people as they are, but who they could become. And I think Dave saw that in me, right? To some extent, even when I was a little battered there in 2011, believed in me. And I'm grateful for that, because if it wasn't for Dave, I would not be sitting here on 4-year anniversary of the podcast, and AFT would not be a brand, and with the amazing people we have here. And it's because of what he saw, and just his ability, to really value people. That he always looked at building people, building companies, building brands. He loved business. He loved the pursuits. He loved seeing people benefit. He loved seeing people see their families benefit, right, from their employment. And he was really big that, a lot of us think about payroll and the cost and, that nut to crack, if you will, as being a business owner. And he was so big that, that employees are assets on the balance sheet and the value they bring to us. And so he was always looking at the value. And something he would always say is, Brad, what's the cost to replace? And so many times as business owners, we get lost in, we have to remember what it's like as an employee. I remember as an employee working hard, not being compensated, end of year bonus, raise, whatever it may be. Those little things meant so much to me, and they just didn't happen. And so many of us have had employees where we forget to speak or address or make them accountable, and then have incentives. And then the time's too late. They go find another position, another job. Someone's going to pay them more, and they're gone. And at that point, only then the employer is looking at the employee saying, well, can I match the pay? Can I increase your pay? Well, where was that 6 months ago before they had another job offer, right? And Dave was big on that always, what's the cost to replace? If I lose someone that's super talented, I'm going to pay so much more in training and onboarding. Why not keep the talent I have? Yes, we understand that there are levels and there are benefit packages and there's cost to every company with an employee. But so many of us, are we worried about the bottom line or our finances, or are we looking at, the health and the people that we have in the company? And it's that value of retaining those people, and every job getting better, every day understand the systems better, every day as they implement these strategies, how much more value do they bring with that experience? And part of the legacy that Dave left with me was just the legacy of really caring about people and their employees. And we had, for those of you that have heard me advertise on the Contractor Coalition Summit, when you think about legacy, a big thing is, again, I've been fortunate to be surrounded with incredible business owners. A lot of people have said, hey, Brad, why did you start the podcast? Well, when I started it, I didn't really have a plan. Of course, you don't know how to build it and get the audio right and all the things you're going to build on a podcast. But one thing I did know is that I was surrounded by incredible people throughout my life. I've met interesting people. I've met incredible clients, right, who are super successful and have a ton of information. So part of the reason I want to start the podcast was not just a legacy thing, but I've known interesting people. I want to have interesting conversation. My goal was always that people listening would gain value. One thing I was not a fan of is at the time when I started mine 4 years ago, there were a lot of podcasts out there that were, pretty generic. And again, I'm not trying to disparage anyone else. I hope that you can understand the sincerity here. But when I would listen and consume as a consumer, I would listen to an episode about someone's story, but I really wanted nuggets. Like, what is it that made them them? What is it that they're doing specifically in marketing or social media or leadership or company culture that I can apply? And so the goal for those of you that listen, right away, I try to always start off right away with that question. It's not like, hey, give us an introduction of who you are. Not that that's not relevant or important, because in some episodes I'll do that later, but ideally the whole goal was that legacy, that the guests come on and they leave 3 or 4 or 5 points that people can apply to their life. And for me, I've had so many guests that have left important information, informative ideas and messages and branding ideas that I've implemented, as a company. And so, when I started the Contractor Coalition Summit, it was just an arm of similar podcasts. Is not only from what I've been, fortunate to be around some great business owners and entrepreneurs, but there's a lot of mistakes I made as a business owner, as a contractor. And I wish that I could share all of those with other contractors so that they wouldn't make the same mistake building a business, the mistakes I've made. And I remember being asked at our last one that we had in Scottsdale, and I was asked, I said, Brad, why do you do what you do? And to be honest, like, I've just a little bit about me from my upbringing, I'm just, the easiest way to say it is, I'm a family guy. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my employees. I care so much about them. Probably the most stress I have as a business owner are my people, making sure that we have the pipeline and the backlog and the work for them to stay busy and support their families. I care about their families. I've had, as like Paul Lundgren's moved here from out of state. I've had Ben Tarwater move from Kansas City. I've had people move from parts of the country. Megan came from California. And I really care that they're landing here and that they have a career and opportunity and to support their family and they have some stability. And I really care about our people. There's a lot of material things in this world that don't matter to me. And again, this isn't about some high horse or being better than anyone, because I don't judge or compare myself that way. I just know, me personally, I find a lot of joy in the success of my people. And I think they see that. I think they know that. They know that from being around me, that I really care. And that brings me more value. And I saw that through Dave, that he was the same, having been around him for so long. And so when people say, Brad, what's your legacy? What does that mean to you? I think that's it. That, even with this 4-year episode, I would hope that anyone that's listened to the podcast could leave and say, you know what, there's a lot of value that I have, life lessons that I've applied in my life and business from the podcast. People that come to the summit, my goal was that, in the first 30 minutes, I'll say I got my money's worth, and that was the goal, right? I think anyone that worked at AFT could say that this was the happiest time in their career. That's my legacy, is that they could say it's the most enjoyment they've ever had, because the reality is construction's hard. Clients are hard, deadlines are hard, budgets are tough, suppliers, labor, all the things we deal with. But if you can create that bubble, that mindset where they come in and there is a family, that there's the camaraderie and there's the happiness and the joy that we have as a team, I think there's a lot of value where people can say, hey, that time in my life was the happiest in my career. And to me, that's my legacy, is, and more importantly is, that customer experience, something we've really tried really hard 11 years, is I can assure you that clients I had 7 years ago, some of which probably didn't have a great experience, maybe some 4 years ago, probably some designers and architects that work with us could say that they didn't have a great experience. And it's unfortunate. I think it's real. But one thing I can tell you, and I could tell any of them, is that we're much better today than we were 11 years ago. And we have the right people and the right systems, and we spend a lot of time. And, one thing legacy-wise, I can tell you that tomorrow I'll be better than I was today. And I know as a brand and as a company, we can say the same thing, that's something that's really important to us. When you think about the biggest life lesson, it's funny. There's a TikTok. Someone, a friend of mine said, "Well, Brad, what's the biggest life lesson you've earned?" And the TikTok was interesting. He said, doing hard things will give you an easy life. Doing easy things, you'll have a hard life. And there's a lot of validity to that statement in the sense that, for me, I look at this and, personally as it applies, it's not easy, right, to be on, to do the summit and stand in front of people for 3 days and instruct, right? It's not easy to public speak. It's not easy to book guests and run the podcast, especially, I have my team that's producing it, but as far as, asking the questions, preparing, doing research on the guest, being out there on social media, there's a lot of things that I know are hard for me. They're hard for a lot of people, but it definitely opens doors, right? And but taking the easy road doesn't always work that way. Michael Guttelli, we were at the summit, and he said, "Brad, you're a pretty optimistic, positive person. Why is that?" And of course, in the car ride, I didn't have much time to speak about that, and I mentioned a little bit today. But one experience going back, for those that know, I served a mission, which means when, for me, I saved money working. I was an electrician in high school. I saved money to pay my own way, and I went and served 2 years in Argentina, where I learned Spanish when after high school when I was 19, before going to college. And the reason I bring it up is because I feel like this really set the tone for my life and career in a lot of ways, and especially with the positivity is, I didn't know Spanish. I took Spanish in high school. I didn't learn anything. I really, out of all my classes, did not pay the attention I should have to Spanish. And so being called Spanish speaking, part of that is I went to a training center called the MTC, which is the Missionary Training Center, and you learn the language. And so for roughly 9 weeks, I was learning Spanish, sitting in a classroom and learning for 9 weeks. But at this time in 1999, which is when I left, there was an issue getting visas. 2-year visas to Argentina were really difficult. And it was time, essentially after my 9 weeks is up, that I was supposed to take my plane ticket, fly to Argentina, to Mendoza, Argentina, and begin. And I didn't get my my visa. And so I remember sitting in a room, and they said, "We're going to reassign you, and we're going to assign you to wherever you go. Everyone's going to a different place." I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and I was actually, so that was the area of the country, and the area that I was assigned was Jasper, Indiana, which is about 30 minutes from French Lick, where Larry Bird grew up. And so I was in southern Indiana, and it was English speaking. So all the Spanish I had for 9 weeks, since I lost, I was there in Indiana for 2 months. And they told me that, they said, if you hit 3 months, that'll be your new mission. You're not going to make it to Argentina. So there was kind of a clock ticking. But bottom line, where I'm going with the story is that end of February, my visa was approved just a couple weeks before that deadline. And so I hopped on a plane the next day and flew to Argentina by myself. And what was really hard is there was about a 2.5-month gap from my Spanish classes. And so by the time I got to Argentina, I didn't know what I was doing. It was really hard to get through the airport, seeing anything in Spanish and not being able to read Spanish. And a few of my peers had gone to like New York and Las Vegas and California, Spanish speaking. And so their Spanish was pretty good. And I just felt pretty defeated that, I didn't get that head start. I didn't get to continue forward, and I was set back. I didn't think I'd catch up. And I was probably in Argentina for about a month and a half and really struggling, wasn't learning language. It's really tough being in a foreign country. Your brain hurts, right? Where you're hearing Spanish all day and you can't really understand, and you're just, just don't know what anyone's telling you. Just kind of smile and wave. And I remember you have a mission president, and that was Doug Steinley. And I went in to see him. I said I need to meet with him. And so I went into him, and I remember sitting across from him, and I was complaining. This young 19-year-old kid, I was super homesick at the time, being in a foreign country and different culture and food, and, didn't understand the language. And it was a really hard time. I remember being really lonely, really homesick. It was really struggle. It was a big struggle for me. And I remember sitting there and, complaining like a 19-year-old would, about being homesick and I'll never learn the language. And I remember he just listened. He didn't say anything. He just sat there and he listened. And then he leaned back in his chair and he just said, Brad, if I was your dad, what would I tell you? And I apologize. I'll speak about some impacts my dad had on me. He passed away young at 64, but when he asked that question, if I was your dad, what would I say? I remember looking at him and saying, I kind of smiled and I said, well, that's it. Time to get to work. And I left and I never looked back. The reason I bring that up is because I knew at that time in my life at 19, I knew that if I could get through living out of the U.S., living out of the country, learning the language, and just figure this out. I'm not sure how, but I figured out that I knew there was nothing in life that could set me aside. And I knew at that time that it's kind of a breaking point, that I knew if I gave up, I really didn't want to, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. If I had given up, that would have set the tone too. That going back to the easy things, you do an easy thing, live a hard life. I would have lived a really hard life, given up at 19 years old, and really set the tone for dealing with hard things now. And fast forward, I spoke earlier about 2011. And again, for personal reasons, I won't share every detail and feeling at that time. But from a self-esteem standpoint, I don't think I've ever been as low as 2011, being divorced and single dad and unemployed. But at the same time, again, setting the tone, right? I felt that was rock bottom in 2000 when I was 19. And so 2011, get through that, and there's been, have the stroke, get through that. I think in life, it's these little stepping stones that, you conquer it and you get a little bit stronger and you conquer it, just like going to the gym, right? It's that consistency and progress. And that's why I look at life now, that it is positive. I've had some pretty rough things, challenges in my life, like all of us have. And, at the end of the day, it comes to pass. I always tell people that, any challenge, I look at some of the tough jobs we've had, tough clients, tough projects that you're scared, may not be going as they should, mistakes we made, expectations maybe we didn't set. And at the as I look back at my career, even 11 years as an entrepreneur, it comes to pass. Like it always passes. Like it's just an opportunity to, it's just that mindset that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to attack the day and I'm going to follow that consistency I was mentioning. And then we're going to find a way around that. And just an insight to my dad that I think is relevant to that experience. And somehow Doug Stallman knew the question to ask me, because that's all he asked me. If I was your dad, what would I tell you? And I just stood up, shook his hand, and walked out, right? And got back to work and quit complaining. My dad wasn't a complainer. He died of cancer. And, I shared that on social media. So I was at the Builder Show. This is last year, 2022 in February. And it was just 2 months before that. My dad he retired early at 59 as a union electrician. My mom was in the school district when my baby sister went into kindergarten. So she had 20 years there before they moved. So they retired early at 59 because I moved to Arizona and I had my 5 siblings here. So there were 6 of us here now. And they were tired of driving out to San Diego. So they're like, we might as well live in Arizona near our kids and grandkids. And, I had a couple of areas of my house where I just didn't have the time to put some pavers in. There's some muddy areas, and especially getting the trash bins from the side yard. Truth be told, we're actually haven't built our own custom home yet. And so in the home we're at, for sake of time, and my trades are busy, it's not like I can pull them over to my house. So my dad's like, hey, why don't we, put some pavers in? Like he he lived his entire life serving. Like, I don't think my parents ever bought a new couch. They just didn't matter to them. They just served their whole life to neighbors, friends. I mean, growing up as a kid through high school, I mentioned my dad was always working around the house and doing stuff for us kids. But it wasn't just us. There were people in our neighborhood, in our church. And my dad he was always serving. He was always doing something for somebody else. He sacrificed a lot. But I remember my wife called me because on the side yard, so to put this in perspective, our house is like a U, like most houses. And by a U, have like a little courtyard coming in from the driveway. Then, you walk into the great room, to the right's, bedrooms, the left is bedrooms. And so on the far left of the house, it's a masonry wall. So there's not like a fence. So to get to the far left side or the west side of the house, you have to come from the driveway, come up the east side of the house, walk all the way around through the backyard, come all the way around to the left side of the house. So you're essentially walking the entire footprint of the house. And it was dirt back there, so my dad wanted to put pavers. And so with my work schedule, it was December, end of year, so I'm working really late hours, not at home. And my dad, he came for 2 days. And I remember my wife Ashley calling me, and she's like, your dad has probably taken 50 wheelbarrows of dirt back that he's, essentially over excavated himself by hand, and then taken 50 wheelbarrows of sand to set pavers. And so for 2 days, my wife just sees my dad taking a wheelbarrow all by himself, 6 years old, just doing this as a token of love for his son, right, and grandkids. And, unfortunately passed away 2 months later. But he did the same thing for my siblings. That's just who he was. And so when you think about legacy, there's definitely a big part of that, right? The influence my dad had on a lot of people in San Diego before he moved. And he was only in Arizona roughly 4.5 years before he passed away. And in those 4 years, he met a tremendous amount of people, made impact on the people of Queen Creek where he lived here. And so that's why, having grown up seeing, my dad work, that I think in life with business or, going back to the easy thing, is that life is tough. It's just hard. It's hard for all of us. Family dynamics can be tough. Business is tough. Relationships are tough. Cost of living, inflation, there's a lot of challenges that we all deal with. And, watching my dad attack those things and always be a steady hand, that he never, very similar to Dave, they just would not overreact. They wouldn't be emotional, just really, really good people. And, learning from them that as a business owner, it's really important that we surround ourselves with good people, that we surround ourselves with people that we want to aspire to. There's that saying that, you want to see if someone's successful, look at who he surrounds himself with, right? That's who he's going to be, or she will be, in the years to come. I've said this so many times on the podcast, chase experience, not money. And I can't reiterate that enough. I was out of college underpaid, but I took opportunities that I knew would catapult my career, right, wrong, or indifferent, things that would challenge me. I look back at my Mauna Lucia days at Beth McGehee, who's a designer. If she ever listens to this, will laugh, because I was this young punk kid that didn't communicate well. I didn't have Dave Clark by my side at the time. And, she put up with me, this young, immature kid out of college, but really taught me a lot, the value of interior design, the value of communication, organization, and something that's taken, been really important to where I am now. And I look back at that experience. I wasn't paid great. And sometimes as a business owner, it's a long game. I look at now, those projects we did and we didn't, I tell people it's not really a good career choice to pay people to build their homes. But in some cases that happens, right? As we're building projects and we don't fully understand the cost and we're young at business. And that's the value of networking. I look at the value of networking now. Rod Collum, who's a very successful Collum Homes here, and Fortunately, Rod, he took me under his wings to some extent, nothing major, just little things that he would converse with me and counsel me, being a young builder. Again, someone that believed in me even as a competitor. And I remember seeing him at the Builder Show. And as we're walking through the Builder Show, he's telling me about the Builder 20. And he said, Brad, the biggest thing that had an impact on my career is joining Builder 20. You need to get in one right away. And I asked him what that was, because at the time I'd never heard of it. And this was many years ago. And shortly thereafter, funnily enough, social media, again, being that consistency, posting every day, I don't know if I started my podcast, but I think I was on the Modern Craftsman, I think I was one of their first 10 that had started with Johnny and Tyler and Nick at the time. And anyways, a builder, Galoni Builders, had called me and said, hey, Brad, do you have interest in joining Builder 20? I said, yeah, absolutely, because I learned all about it. And sure enough, was fortunate to be put in the Hammers group, which is, one of the original groups. And it's been a game changer. And then, some kudos to Johnny Horahan. Again, being pretty young at AFT, and we definitely didn't have some of, call it the signature clients or notoriety or projects or some of the employees we had. But Johnny was always like, hey, I remember him introducing me to Matt Reisinger, like, hey, this is one of the best builders. And it was super kind of him to say that. And through that, met Mark La Liberté and built his home. And of course, Matt was super kind. And it's just a value that, there's a lot of great people in the construction community, locally and nationally. And I don't take that lightly, the value of networking. And for anyone listening, it's really important to network in your market, outside of your market, network in your industry, outside of your industry. Can't say enough the value of getting out there and meeting people. And again, not just for selfish reasons, but what's the value you bring them? What's the value proposition that we all bring? What's the value proposition I can bring anyone I'm networking with in some way, and vice versa. And that definitely grows over time. Working on your business, a lot of people have asked the key to retaining people. Company outings and events, it's icing, but that's not good company culture. Something that's taken me a long time to realize is that I had good people in the past, many, many years ago, and I'd bring them in, kick them off the pier, and hope they'd swim. And of course they'd sink, because we weren't set up for training, for systems, for organization. I just expect them to do it, and it's a lot easier said than done. And so what I've realized, if you really want to have good company culture, Disney has a motto that they, hire slow, fire fast. Well, that's part of it, but the integration is the most important. That employees need two things, right? They really need to understand what their role is, what their scope of work. The more that there are inefficiencies in your company and your portfolio and your projects and your organization, the employees see that, they feel it. It takes a toll on them. They get burnt out. They get tired. They get exhausted, working too many hours, not having help, overlapping, not having clear definition of scope. Who does what? Where's the baton go? If they don't understand that their role, and there's double work, and they will leave. It's going to happen. More importantly, if they're not held accountable in a positive way, if they don't understand, what does my long-term growth look like? What are my opportunities at this company? And again, every company is different on size. Like, we understand that, but at the core of it, whether you have one employee or 20 or 100, do all of them understand what's going to make them successful? What's going to make you happy as a business owner by employing them? How are they performing on a day-to-day basis? How are they performing? And if they can understand their role and be accountable to it and be efficient and take pride in what they do. And the second part of that is they need to believe in the company and the brand. If they believe in the company, if they believe in the leadership, if they believe in the direction, if they believe in, the end result, the product they're making or building, that brand awareness and that belief in what they're doing, if they enjoy the product and they have clear definition of their scope, you're going to have incredible company culture. And then, the outings and the group text and, the lunches and these things that we do, and the bonuses, if you will, and the pay and health benefits, and, all these things add to it. But at the core, I wish I knew sooner the value of systems. I really do. I really wish I understood, not only from an employee perspective, but as I mentioned, there's certain clients and network that we've, didn't have the best relationship. And really it comes down to the checks and balances internally. And that's something we've worked on. And so the common question, what I wish I knew sooner starting my company, would be the value of numbers, understanding numbers in the company and budgets and, overhead and, how to be profitable and, how to hire people and understand how to bill for their time. And of course the system aspect, being organized and having systems in place. And these are really important items that have accelerated our growth for sure. In the last 3 to 4 years, the good people we've had, and I will say the success story to that is, although we've lost some good people and had our challenges, especially early on. And one thing, maybe before I speak about successes, is one element to that is early on the podcast, I interviewed Jeremy Andrus, who's the owner of Traeger. And he said something. He said, it doesn't matter how talented or experienced employees, if they're toxic to the culture, to the rest of the employees, you need to fire them. It doesn't matter. And it's a tough lesson. The next day I actually had to let go of one of my employees that was really toxic to the company. And the reality is it doesn't matter how talented they are. And that goes back to the company culture that I look now. And by having the right people that believe in it, that understand their role, the camaraderie, it's incredible. The success story now is, outside of terminating a couple of people for lack of performance, but people out of their own will leaving. We've been fortunate to retain, the 20 employees we've had for the last, 4 years as we've grown. They've come on and gotten better. And, we are very fortunate that we have a few employees from day one. I think 3 of our employees were from day one and they're still here 11 years later. Patrick, Sue, and Adam started with us from day one and here they are still here. And a lot of our employees, are 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and even the new ones. And very fortunate that, as I mentioned early on, that they're getting better with every project, better with the systems. They have great ideas. We, the leadership council, which has been valuable, as we sit down with our leadership team and go through strategies of the company, and they give their advice and experience based on what they're doing on day to day. And it just has made our company so much better. And that client experience, which is something that's been a big focus of ours, is so much better. Anyone building a home with us today it's going to be way better than it was years ago. And we're so grateful for that. And, for the wonderful people around us. The lack of communication. I touched on this earlier, but I think it's too easy for us to come up with excuses. Most people, either one, some of us can be anxious to have hard conversations, difficult conversations on timelines or budgets or issues or mistakes. Some of us may be justified that we're busy. We don't have time to call people back or text them back or respond. The lowest hanging fruit when we started our company is communication, site cleanliness. These are pain points that have been a struggle for a long time. And why can't we do better communicating? Why can't we respond? And of course, there's a sales process aspect to that, to set expectations so that, here's our hours of operation, communication with our employer, with our clients, so that they understand. And some of our clients, are busy and their time to sit down and address concerns may be late at night or maybe on the weekend. But setting those expectations so that they can understand our work hours too and the health of our employees, because really we do want to control some of those external elements that do have an impact on company culture and employees and make sure that they do have times to recharge their battery. Not everyone's like us as an entrepreneur working all the time. So we have to be mindful of those that aren't. Goals, something going back to goals of a company. And there are 2 things. There's goals and objectives. And one thing I've asked our team is, what's the difference between a goal and objective? And, an objective would be, I want to be healthier, but you can't measure it. So a goal is something you can measure. So, okay, your objective would be, I want to be healthier. Okay, so what are the goals to complete your objective? Well, the goals would be, I'm going to eat so many calories a day. I'm going to work out, an hour a day, do cold plunge, run, lift weights. Essentially things you can track our goals. So as a company, as every year we have objectives of the company of, here's the objectives, like here's what we want to be. Okay, you can sit here and say, well, I want to be the best builder. Well, that's arbitrary, right? But essentially, maybe you want to better your systems. Okay, well, that's could be your objective, but specifically, what does that mean? Are you going to implement different software? We use Buildertrend. Right now we're working on the owner portal. How can we make that customer experience even better for them? Access to information, save time for us, have all our documents, contracts, budgets, for them at, a live 24/7 click. I bring this up because going back to my early 30s, I was training for a half marathon, and I didn't know what to expect as my first half marathon. I hadn't run a whole lot since high school, and I was running the La Jolla Half Marathon, which is in April. And La Jolla Half Marathon is pretty tough. It's 13 miles, and you start off at the Del Mar Fair. Someone that's from Southern California, start at Del Mar Fair, pretty flat. But then you have to climb Torrey Pines. And mile 6, you're going up these switchbacks, and they are absolutely killer. So about a mile up of these switchbacks as you climb Torrey Pines. And then, you run down La Jolla into La Jolla Shores. You run along the beach there. But then you have to climb, mile 12, 13, you're climbing to La Jolla Cove as you come into the finish. So needless to say, my first marathon, which is my first time, I think I was 30 at the time, I go run this half marathon, and I was ill prepared. Like many of us running a business, right? We're not prepared. We, like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a game plan to get punched in the face, and got punched in the face. I hit Torrey Pines Hill. I didn't walk, but it destroyed me. And I felt like I limped in the next 6 miles into the finish line. So the next year, I said, okay, I have a goal. I want to break 7 minutes a mile for 13 miles, despite, some major hills. Like, it's a really tough half marathon. But this time, went to San Diego and trained on that hill a few times. There's some places in Los Angeles and up in, had to Lake Saguaro, some hills. So I went and trained there. And, the second time that I did the half marathon, I did it. I finished in 1 hour and 26 minutes, which was, I believe my pace was a 6:36 mile for the 13 miles. I think there were 6,500 runners. I placed 25th out of the 6,500. So I was pretty excited. I didn't have a goal to finish top 25, but I knew I wanted to break 7 minutes. And so part of that, when I go back to the goal setting and the mental side of it, it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to break 7 minutes, but I did have the goal of what I needed to do that. And I knew every mile where I had to be at that mile so that I could track my time. So essentially my splits, I was tracking my splits, and I was training for that for 4 months. So I trained about 3.5 months before the marathon. And then when I'd go run the course in La Jolla and, Del Mar, I would train those splits, because I knew, of course, to average that mile on the downhills. Yeah. I think on running down La Jolla, I was able to hit 5 minutes, but you're running downhill. So a 5-minute mile downhill, it's not terrible, but going uphill, you're running 9-minute mile, right? So you have to figure out, okay, 9 minutes up, 5 down, essentially breaking those splits down. So I was really breaking that down over the course. And I only bring that up because I've taken the same analogy in the business, that with business, there's certain things you want to do, and you really have to break it down at that minuscule level to not only prepare yourself for that and your team, but also break it down. Okay, well, here's how we're going to get there. Here's how we're going to get through this climb, this downhill, this uphill, and then lay out that vision for your team. And, by doing that and setting those goals and understanding the difference of goals and objectives, well, now you can be more calculated in setting realistic objectives, realistic measurable goals that will line up to that to make that happen. Again, for me, it's never been an ego thing. Ideally, I hope that everyone I hire is better than me, that they're smarter than me, that they're more talented than me. There's a lot of value to, we have some incredible people on our team all over the board. The compliments we get from our team, and I'm not going to single them out because it's all of them, but they work so hard. They're so smart. They have so much talent. It's just amazing to sit now at a point of our brand 11 years later, to sit when we have our production meetings and see the wisdom, the information, the application, the technology, the training, the coordination that they're doing, and to see them teach each other and witness that is just incredible. But it doesn't happen if you as a manager are micromanaging and trying to control everything. It only happens as if they have the full autonomy, right? You hire good people, you empower them. Hire good people, empower them. Give them the tools, stay out of their way, and then of course, take the advice, to make the process better. One of the questions as a couple here to finish, but who was your first hire in their position? So our first hire was a superintendent and a coordinator. The reason being the coordinator, our project coordinator, the definition of their role, they're writing all the contracts, they're doing all the purchasing, submittals, RFIs. Um, they're really the core. As you look at the schedule, they're ordering windows, they're getting cabinet samples signed off, shop drawings signed off for windows and cabinetry. Pavers, if it's a long lead time, custom tile coming from overseas, countertops. So that project coordinator position is really valuable because that allows our field to be real successful. And then the superintendent, of course, that allowed me to get out of the field, and that's that opportunity cost that, I was out in the field running projects when we first started. I took every job we could get, like anyone would, doing a powder bathroom, a patio. Even though we had experience, it takes a while to build a brand. That was pre-social media when we started, and of course, social media has been a big part of it for the last while. But people have asked, okay, well, the first hire, whether you're outsourcing accounting, but essentially superintendent work so that you can now focus on the business is ideal. And you want to get to the point where you have enough projects, of course, you can bill them. And for any of you that want to know how we do billing and cost plus, come to our contractor coalition summit. We walk through that, pretty openly. But essentially, people that want to build a company, and how do you get your first lead? How do you get that first project? I always tell everyone that if you really want the opportunity to build a company and build specifically a custom home building company, go build a spec home. Whether you have connections to fund you, or some investors or former clients. But if you can go build a spec home, go design it right, get the right team, get it to market, get it sold, get your sign up. Well, a couple things are happening. One, you have throughout construction a home you're touring. So as clients are calling you, you now have ready product that you're touring them at frame stage, at rough stage, at finish stage, completion stage. So you got essentially a year there of free tours that you're taking people through to see the product that you have. You're getting your sign in the neighborhood, so clients looking to buy, there's your sign. You have marketing material, right, of the custom home. You have name. You've already built a house. Now you built one. Now, next, it's a flat lot maybe. Now you go to a hillside and one in the HOA division, one of the nicer divisions. So you can catapult that. So I always tell people, it's really hard to be doing remodels or small jobs and then get someone to say, okay, Brad, I'm going to take a chance on you. Why don't you build your first house, which will be my personal house? It's always tough, just like anything. They want to hire someone with experience. Well, where to get experience? Okay, well, go make your own experience. Go build a house. And so I always, just as some advice, that's a great way to get your branding, build something that's different, product-wise, that's different to the market, that has some value. This sets you apart, that people see it. And all in all, hopefully, I know some aspects was a little personal in this episode, but, it's been 4 years. 4 years I've been doing this podcast every week for 4 years. And, the time management, I get asked a lot, well, how do you manage your time? I mentioned I don't sleep a whole lot. And fortunately for those listening, the doctor said that's not stroke related. So, and again, maybe different opinions, but out of, the A doctors, they're like, no, it's, everyone has different sleep schedules. But I think more importantly for me is being efficient with my time. I'm obsessed with my calendar and where I'm at throughout the day, and what office and who I'm meeting with. And so the calendar plays a huge role. Efficiencies, 7 habits of highly effective people, understanding those boxes, the quadrants, what's important. I really know every day. Before I start the week, I know the week in advance, my calendar, where I'm going to be, what time, what's going on, what part of town, and, information in, information out, that process of information, delegating to really good people, making sure you have time for exercise and your health is really important. I live that firsthand, but, eating healthy, diet, exercise, make that a priority. If you meditate or you read, other amazing things, outlets, make sure you have time for your family, working around that as well. Life's too short. So I can't thank all of you enough for the journey, for listening to me for this last hour and 20 minutes. But again, just a few things I wanted to share of, my dad, that had a big impact on me, really set the tone. I look at when I went to college after my mission, And I remember being pretty discouraged at first. Just it's pretty eye opening when you leave high school, you go out of the country, you come back, you go to college. So a couple years later, I haven't really been in the school system, if you will, university system, and now you're getting thrust in with a lot of college kids that are really bright. College kids that are top of their class, and you feel pretty, again, insecure that, hey, am I capable? Could I succeed? And again, just drawing back that, hey, I learned Spanish. If I can read, write, and speak fluent Spanish, with the challenges they're giving me, then I can get through college. And then if I can get through divorce, and I can get through entrepreneurship. And as I get through this job, I can get through next. And so, life's a lot about stepping stones, and that positive mindset is a huge part of that. There's something to be said about that quiet confidence. And, that's why I really admire. It's funny, as a kid, I think this is a lesson I really wish I understood more. I'm sure most of us can relate that as children. I remember there'd be kids like, oh, that kid's the smartest in the class. Oh, that kid's the most athletic. And so you just feel, especially as a young adolescent, that some people just were born different. They just have a different opportunity. And it wasn't until this stage of my life that I realized, yeah, there's definitely inherent talents and attributes that some people have. But I'm a big sports fan, and you look at sports and you look at, Michael Jordan or Tom Brady. Yes, Michael Jordan had a growth spurt, and he's 6'6", which is pretty rare, right, to have the athleticism he did. But that mindset, that relentless, working out, he's going to come after you, that competitiveness, that's something you can't teach. You have it or you don't. Tom Brady, everyone knows his story. Draft 299, last in the draft, and first one there, last one to leave. Put in the work, would read defenses, study, and work hard, and had a great arm, not the best arm. And you just see that in life. What I've realized with business, sports, life, that yes, some people have circumstances that they're born into or head starts, but at the end of the day, there's hard work, there's determination that comes down to you. And if you're willing to put in the work and do those hard things and go above and beyond and find ways to challenge you, find ways to push yourself to the limit, to see what you can do, see what your business can do, that's only how you're going to figure it out. So those are my closing words. Again, thankful for you all. It's been a fun 4 years. I look forward to the next 4, and can't thank all my guests enough. Can't thank my family enough for the support. And you guys are awesome. So thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe. Make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.